Hey there. All right. So I had a very short walk with my dog today because it was sprinkling as I went out, and my dog turned me around. He didn't want his paws wet or something. And then just as I came to read the book and start on chapter 30, the Anakin in the Apothecary, started to dump rain. So that's probably okay because the Kong Olaf is in very deep water, and Shishkin has just betrayed all of his team. And so now we're going to find out how that plays out. My question to you is, how would you deal with Mr. Shishkin? Do you agree with the way that his colleagues are handling his attempt at sabotaging their mission, or would you handle it in a different way? So one thing that good readers do is they always kind of have questions and thoughts and arguments with the characters in their head so that they're focused on the narrative. And then they jot it even and document interesting pieces. So we're going to do that as we go along. We're not going to actually jot, but we're going to make sure we have some conversations in our head, and we're going to consider, how would you deal with Mr. Shishkin? Chapter 30, the Anakin. We woke Captain Norberg, who was sleeping in his clothes, and came instantly awake on seeing two stowaways on his boat. The apothecary apologized for our presence and told him that Shishkin had been assigned by the Soviets to disable the Kong Olaf. The captain rubbed a hand over his yellow hair and considered the news. I suppose you could take it as a compliment, he told the apothecary. They must be afraid of you. They could have arrested us in Russian waters without sending a saboteur. The apothecary shook his head. They've overestimated my powers. I am no match for the Soviet Navy. Captain Norberg studied Benjamin and me. In all my years at sea, I've never had a stowaway bigger than a cat. We're sorry, sir, Benjamin said. The captain sighed. I can't lead my men into an ambush without telling them what to expect, he said. I'll wake the ones who aren't on watch and assemble them on the bridge, and you can tell them where we stand. He put on his coat and hat and went forward to the crew quarters. The apothecary stood in the middle of the corridor and stared morosely at the floor. Okay, morose? That's a 50-cent word. You should look it up. We should abandon the plan, he said. No, Junlo said. We have come so far. He shook his head. Benjamin and I left them there and went to wake Count Willy. We explained the situation while he pulled a burgundy silk dressing gown over striped pajamas and knuckled sleep out of his eyes. Shishkin? I trusted that man. They kidnapped his family, I said. The Count yawned. That's why it's best to be free of attachments. Much safer that way. How did you get aboard? Invisibility, Benjamin said. Ah, the Count said. You're hardier than I thought, running around naked in this weather. You'll do well on that freezing rock of Nova Zembla, if we ever get to Nova Zembla. Does anyone live there, I asked. Samoyeds, the Count said. They were reindeer breeders on the mainland, the best in the world, until the Soviets moved them to Nova Zembla and forced them to work on collective farms. The people rose up, so the Russians shot them down from airplanes. Charming, no? How can the Soviets test a bomb where people live? The Count shrugged. You Americans have done it too. And if the Soviets were willing to shoot unarmed citizens from airplanes, perhaps they don't care if the rest are poisoned by radiation. Do you suppose it's cold on the bridge? What an ungodly hour for a meeting. You should talk to the crew, I said. You could be convincing and inspiring. The apothecary seems discouraged. Oh, he'll be fine, the Count said, pulling his fur-lined trench coat over the dressing gown and taking up his black walking stick. But I wasn't sure. The crew crowded into the wheelhouse in varying degrees of sleepiness and disarray. A piratical sailor with silver hoop earrings in both ears had the wheel. There was also a skinny boy who looked about 17, the sun-bleached Ludovic, a man with a nose like a lump of dough, and the old cook who looked ready to retire. They all looked as if they had better things to do than spend the rest of their lives in a Siberian prison. The apothecary, standing in front of them, polished his spectacles anxiously with his sleeve. The Count found a spot inside the wheelhouse, but Benjamin and I had to stand in the galley with Jinlo, the men's backs partly blocking our view of the apothecary. I wished we had coached him, wished we could have given him some of the fervor Benjamin had against the lunch lady. So for me, that's an again and again moment. We're back to Benjamin's attitude towards the lunch lady at St. Bendon's. And that connection shows us how the author would prefer to have the apothecary behave and the contrast. So it's interesting how she uses this idea that seems so marginal, so minimal in the beginning again and again. He put on his spectacles again. As you know, he began, but the engines and the wind drowned him out. Speak loud, Jinlo said. The apothecary coughed. As you know, he said more loudly, our plan is to contain an atomic bomb being tested on Nova Zembla and to counteract its destructive effects. That is the task we have been working towards for many years, and I am confident that we have the correct approach. The men waited. They knew this part, and he sounded like a boring teacher. I wished he would use fewer long words. He was going to lose them. But now, it seems that our friend Leonid Shishkin has been sent by the Soviet authorities to stop us. He is restrained in his cabin at the moment, but we are exposed. The Soviets know we are coming. The men looked at one another in silence. I know that many of you have children in Norway, the apothecary went on. I realize that the danger of the trip is now heightened to the point of impossibility, and I can't ask any man to risk his life for me. My best advice to you is to take us back to England and go home to your families. I winced. It was one thing to lose the men's faith, another to try to send them home. He was supposed to talk about the radiation, the fish, the reindeer, the Samoyeds, the children. Actually, that's my request to you, he said, that we go home. It's the only rational thing to do. A clear, loud voice came from beside me. This not our request, Jinlo said. She was standing very straight. Not mine. It isn't mine either, Count Billy said, his fur collar up, leaning on his walking stick just inside the door. The apothecary looked surprised by the objections. I wondered if he had worked alone for so long, getting only letters from disembodied scientists, that he had forgotten he had colleagues and friends. Well, he stammered, I suppose we could go on. That is what I intended to ask you to do in the first place. But the immensity of what we are facing... He trailed off, and I realized he had caught sight of Benjamin standing behind the men. He hesitated, and his eyes softened, and something seemed to shift in him. When the apothecary began speaking again, his voice had become oddly strong and thrilling. You have children, he said, and you want to be able to protect them. I want you to be able to go home and protect them. But I believe what my colleagues are saying is this, that we should not stop at our desire to protect our own children in this immediate world. We want the streets they walk to be safe and the walls around them to be sound, and we want to be able to put food in their bellies. These are natural desires. He paused. But if we truly want them to be safe and well, we must make the greater world a different place. As it stands, we are all threatened at every moment, and nothing we do to lock our own doors and earn our pay and tuck our children in bed will make the slightest difference. I believe we can achieve a safer world on this voyage if we succeed, but I can't guarantee success. The Soviet Navy, as I have said, is waiting for the Kongolov. They have our description and will be very difficult to elude. So I leave you all to make your choice. So for me, this would be on page 270, 269, 270, like a turning point moment where we see that the apothecary has rededicated himself to his mission. I also see a theme kind of poking through here that to save the world, you have to sacrifice, or making the world a safe place is worth sacrificing for. Something like that, because that has come up again and again as we see Benjamin and Janie making choices that aren't always in their best interest, but would help others. So I want to see if that plays out throughout the story. You can check with me too. No one spoke. and we kept moving north toward the waiting Soviet ships. Suddenly, I heard my own small voice in that crowded wheelhouse of grown men. Could we make the boat invisible? I asked. The men turned to see where the voice had come from, and I felt myself blush. The apothecary shook his head. It's too big, I'm afraid. The sailor at the wheel with the earrings said, We could disguise her. I'm sorry, the apothecary said, blinking behind his spectacles. The boat, the skinny crewman said, understanding. We could disguise the boat like pirates and warships used to. That would be difficult, the apothecary said. Not so difficult, Jinlo said. It can't hurt to try, said the captain. We need paint, Jinlo said. Not blue, not white. The crew sprang into action, opening the storage bins on deck. They produced 2 cans of red paint from beneath the piles of rope, plus several paintbrushes. Not those, Jinlo said, dismissing the paintbrushes. Too slow. She took the paint cans to the little galley where she chose the largest cooking pot and dumped the paint into it. But I make the oatmeal in that pot, the cook complained. Your oatmeal already tastes like glue, Ludwig said. So what if it tastes like paint? There was a strange air on board of anticipation and growing willingness. The apothecary brought his black leather bag from the cabin and joined Jinlo, who took a bottle of gray powder from him and tapped some into the pot. What's that? I asked. It's like magnet, she said, but not magnet. She stirred the pot, smelled it, and added something else from the apothecary's bag. The paint seemed to move almost restlessly in the pot. She let it run in ribbons off a wooden spoon to test the consistency. The red liquid was a little less bright now and a little runnier. It's good, she said. The apothecary helped her decant the heavy pot back into the paint cans. The boat was still moving north into the wind through the dark night, and Jinlo asked the captain to bring it near to a stop. He nodded to the man with the earrings, and the boat slowed. Then she carried her can of paint forward to the bow and leaned over the starboard rail. She waited for the men to gather around her. She had a sense of occasion and knew her audience. And then she carefully tilted the paint over the lip of the steel hull. The red color didn't drip or run down, but spread so rapidly and evenly over the vertical side of the boat that it looked like water spreading over a flat floor. It continued, as far as I could tell, beneath the surface of the waves, unaffected by the water. The men watched, mesmerized. They'd spent years of their lives scraping and painting boats, but this paint moved on its own, as if drawn to any surface. Can you teach us to do that? Ludwig asked. After Nova Zembla, Jinlo said. Then I teach you. She took the second can to the port side to run the paint down over the hull, watching it spread and wrap itself around the hull. Then studied her work. She found that she had missed a spot and poured a little more until she was satisfied. At the stern, she poured the last of the paint, and the boat was entirely red. The word Kong Olaf, we're gone. The men stared at Jinlo and the apothecary with shining eyes in silence. It was a good job that would have taken them a week in dry dock. If they'd had doubts about the apothecary's ability before, those doubts were gone. Then the skitty young crewman piped up. She needs a new name, he said. Who does? The apothecary asked. The boat. It's a dead giveaway if she doesn't have a name. Of course, the apothecary said. What should it be? Again there was silence. The Anakin, Ludwig ventured. Is that a suitable boat name? It's my little girl's name. She's a fierce little thing. He looked around at his friends. I've always told her I'd name a boat for her. I didn't think it'd be so soon, but if we do this, I'd be doing it for her. Does that mean you'll go with us then? The apothecary asked on the Anakin. The men looked at each other, and at the same moment, they all threw their arms in the air, and a great cheer rang out on the deck. The Anakin! They cried. Their voices were hoarse with emotion. I looked at Benjamin beside me, and I could tell he was proud of his father. Count Willi elbowed me. See, he said, I had a feeling the soft cell, would work. I don't know, I whispered. I think it was Jinlo's paint that did it. The apothecary stood blinking at the men, overwhelmed. The Anakin it is, then, he said. Ludwig's tan face broke into a blinding smile. He went to put his daughter's name on the side of the boat, looking enormously proud. The captain took over at the wheel, and the others started to drift back to bed. It had gotten so late that it was early. A glow of light appeared in the east. Ludwig called astounded, "The red paint is already dry." "We still have to do something about Shiskin's family," I said. "I've been working out an idea," Benjamin said. "Who's the nicest of all of us? I mean, the softest touch." "Jinlo," Count Philly said, and we stared at him in disbelief, until he burst out laughing at his own joke. It was my father's kind of joke, and I couldn't help smiling. "I think it's Janey," Benjamin said. "Of course it's Janey," the Count said. "It isn't you, and it certainly isn't me." I frowned, secretly pleased. "I'm not that nice," I said. "Here's what we'll do," Benjamin said. So they're going to send Janey in to deal with Mr. Shiskin and about his family. Do you think that's a good idea? Just saying. Give it some thought. Thanks for listening with me, and I'll share more another time. Remember to read and jot and think about theme and again moments and asking yourself questions. Bye.